The latest developments surrounding Sally's spectra on the young and the restless have started to stir a very specific kind of speculation among viewers, and it is easy to understand why. There comes a point in every long-running soap story when frustration stops feeling like a temporary obstacle and starts looking like the beginning of an exit arc. Sally appears to be standing dangerously close to that line. For a while, Genoa City offered her the kind of promise that matched her spirit. It was supposed to be a place where reinvention could happen, where her talent, ambition, and resilience could finally be rewarded instead of constantly tested. She arrived with intelligence, style, and the stubborn determination of a woman who had already survived too many humiliations to let another city break her. Yet now the tone around her has changed. Instead of feeling like a contender in a world of power players, Sally increasingly feels like someone watching doors close one after another, professionally sidelined and emotionally drained. As if the city she once tried to conquer has slowly begun to reject her. That is why more and more fans are starting to ask the same question with growing urgency. Is Sally about to make a major move? And could that move finally take her back to Los Angeles? The idea is not coming out of nowhere. In many ways, a return to Los Angeles would not simply be a geographical shift for Sally, but a deeply symbolic one. Los Angeles is tied to her history, her rise, her mistakes, her hunger, and her identity as a fashion force. Genoa City may have given her emotional entanglements and temporary chances, but it has never fully felt like the place that understood the essence of who Sally is at her core. Sally is not built to live on the margins of other people's stories. She is not meant to drift endlessly through romantic disappointment and corporate half-measures while more established families dominate the landscape around her. She is a creator, a risk-taker, a woman whose instincts are sharpest when she is building something, defending something, or fighting for something that reflects her own vision. The longer she remains professionally stagnant, the clearer it becomes that her real crisis is not just about heartbreak or disappointment. It is about misalignment. She is in the wrong environment for the version of herself she still wants to become. And when a character like Sally starts feeling trapped in the wrong environment, a dramatic relocation suddenly begins to feel not only possible but inevitable. What makes this possibility so compelling is that her dissatisfaction in Genoa City is unfolding onto fronts at once. On a personal level, Sally has endured enough emotional setbacks to leave even the strongest person exhausted. Relationships that once seemed full of promise have either collapsed under pressure, become too complicated to trust, or turned into reminders of how little stability she truly has. She has always been someone who loves hard, hopes hard, and when necessary, rebuilds hard. But there is a limit to how many emotional disappointments a person can absorb before survival instinct takes over. Lately, Sally's presence has carried that unmistakable energy of someone who is tired of pretending the next conversation, the next deal, or the next romantic shift will somehow change everything. Her disappointments are no longer isolated incidents. They are starting to form a pattern, and patterns are dangerous because they force clarity. They make it impossible to keep lying to yourself. Sally may still be functioning, still dressing well, still speaking with confidence. But underneath that polished exterior there is a growing sense that Genoa City has become a place where she is constantly asked to endure rather than thrive. Professionally, the frustration cuts even deeper because it strikes at the center of her identity. Sally does not merely like fashion. Fashion is the language through which she understands power, beauty, reinvention, and control. It is the one arena where she can turn imagination into status, ambition into substance, and vulnerability into armor. When her career is stalled, she does not simply feel bored or underused. She feels erased. That is exactly why the rumors about her possibly returning to Los Angeles have gained such momentum. Her fashion career in Genoa City has not evolved in the way she hoped. The opportunities have been too unstable, the momentum too weak, and the recognition too inconsistent. For someone with Sally's level of drive, that kind of stagnation is suffocating. It creates a quiet but growing resentment, not only toward the city around her but toward herself for staying longer than she should have. The tragedy of Sally's current position is that she has enough talent to do something extraordinary, but not enough support in Genoa City to fully unleash it. At some point, A woman like that starts looking back toward the place where her ambition once burned hottest and asking whether she walked away too soon. That is where the possibility of joining Katie Logan's new fashion venture becomes far more than an interesting crossover theory. It starts to look like a credible next chapter. Katie is currently struggling to establish a real identity for Logan, and that struggle matters because it creates the exact kind of opening Sally could step into. Good intentions alone do not build a lasting fashion house, and Katie is learning that the hard way. She wanted legitimacy, credibility, and a meaningful creative direction, which is why bringing in Eric as lead designer may have seemed like a brilliant move at first. On paper, it carried prestige. It linked the company to legacy, craftsmanship, and one of the most respected names in the business. But fashion is merciless toward nostalgia when nostalgia can no longer keep up with the present. A legendary reputation may draw attention initially, yet if the work itself no longer feels sharp, relevant, or inspired, that reputation quickly turns into a burden. Katie may have entered this arrangement hoping Eric would elevate the brand. But instead she now appears trapped between respect for his history and panic over what his limitations could do to her future. The emotional difficulty of that situation should not be underestimated. Katie is not dealing with an ordinary employee. She is dealing with a man whose name carries history, pride, and family significance. Nobody wants to be the person who says out loud that Eric is losing his edge. Nobody wants to be the one forced to acknowledge that admiration cannot compensate for decline. Yet business has a brutal way of demanding honesty, especially when a brand is still trying to establish itself. Ridge may have sounded harsh when he warned that Eric was losing his ability as a designer, but what once seemed like cruelty now looks more like foresight. Katie can only ignore that truth for so long before it starts damaging her credibility, her brand, and her confidence as a leader. She may have entered this venture with optimism, but optimism fades quickly when the collections fail to excite and the vision begins to blur. If she wants Logan to survive, she will have to act boldly, and bold action often means replacing comfort with risk. That is exactly why the idea of hiring Sally becomes so dramatically attractive. Sally would not be a safe choice in a conventional sense, but she would be an electric one. She represents the opposite of creative decline. She is modern, instinctive, hungry, and emotionally tied to fashion in a way that makes her work feel alive. She understands spectacle, silhouette, reinvention, and above all, the emotional seduction of a strong point of view. Katie does not just need a designer who can sketch beautiful clothes. She needs someone who can inject urgency into the brand, someone whose presence itself tells the world that Logan is no longer trying to imitate old formulas. Sally could do that. More than that, she could do it with the kind of defiant energy that makes people pay attention. Her hiring would not simply fill a role. It would send a message that Katie is done playing cautiously and is ready to rebuild her company around vision rather than sentiment. The real power of such a move lies in the layers of history beneath it. Sally returning to Los Angeles and stepping into a meaningful position in fashion would not happen in an emotional vacuum. Her departure from that world was messy enough that any comeback would immediately generate shock, curiosity, and resistance. That is exactly what makes the story so rich. A quiet return would never suit Sally anyway. If she comes back, it should be with purpose, tension, and the sense that unfinished business has finally resurfaced. The people who once underestimated her would be forced to look at her differently. The people who dismissed her as reckless or unserious would have to reckon with the fact that she survived, evolved, and came back still standing. And for Sally herself, the move would carry a painful edge of vindication. It would not simply be about getting another job. It would be about reclaiming a part of herself that has been dimmed for too long. At the same time, such a return would not be emotionally simple for Sally. That is what makes this possibility feel dramatically honest. Even if Los Angeles offers career salvation, it would also force her to confront the ghosts of who she used to be. Returning to the city where so much of her ambition, heartbreak, humiliation, and determination were forged could reopen old wounds just as easily as it creates new opportunities. Sally is not the same woman who left. She has been changed by disappointment, by love, by survival, and by the slow erosion that comes from spending too much time in a place that cannot fully value you. That means any decision to return would likely come with internal conflict. Part of her might fear that going back would look like retreat, like admitting she could not make Genoa City work. Another part of her might resent the idea of needing Los Angeles again after trying so hard to build something elsewhere. But deeper than either fear would be a harder truth. Staying where she is may now be the real surrender. There is also something deeply compelling about the contrast between Sally and the current state of Katie's business. Logan needs urgency. Sally needs direction. Logan needs a jolt of relevance. Sally needs a stage worthy of her talent. Katie needs someone willing to take creative risks. Sally needs someone willing to let her do exactly that. The pieces fit together in a way that feels too narratively sharp to ignore. Even the timing works. Sally's disappointment in Genoa City has reached a level where change now feels emotionally justified rather than abrupt. And Katie's growing crisis with Eric creates exactly the kind of vacancy that would make Sally's arrival feel like both a rescue and a disruption. It would solve a practical problem while igniting a storm of emotional consequences, which is exactly the kind of storytelling that soap audiences respond to best. If this move does happen, it could mark the beginning of Sally's most interesting chapter in a long time. Not because it would guarantee success, but because it would restore conflict to the right place. Instead of watching Sally slowly wither in professional frustration and personal disappointment, viewers would see her thrown back into an environment where her talent actually matters and her choices could have real impact. She would once again become active rather than reactive, dangerous rather than defeated. And even if the road ahead in Los Angeles were filled with resistance, rivalries, and sabotage, that would still suit Sally far better than quiet stagnation. She does not need ease. She needs stakes. She needs the chance to create, to provoke, to clash, to prove herself, and to remind everyone why her name still carries weight. For Katie, bringing Sally in would also reveal something powerful about her own growth. It would mean recognizing that preserving dignity and preserving business are not always the same thing. It would mean accepting that sentimentality cannot be the foundation of a fashion empire. It would mean risking criticism in order to save what she built. That choice would not be painless, especially if it requires admitting that Ridge was right about Eric all along. But sometimes the strongest move a leader can make is the one that feels emotionally impossible. Hiring Sally would be exactly that kind of move. It would be ruthless in the most practical sense, but also smart, modern, and surprisingly visionary. In the end, the growing speculation about Sally Spectra's next step feels so strong because it touches on something larger than one possible crossover or one potential job offer. It touches on the idea of a woman standing at the edge of reinvention after too much disappointment has forced her to stop pretending she is fulfilled. Sally has not lost her talent. She has not lost her instincts. She has not lost the fire that once made her impossible to ignore. What she has lost is patience for a life that no longer reflects her potential. That is why a return to Los Angeles, and possibly to Katie Logan's orbit, feels like more than fan wishful thinking. It feels like the natural eruption of pressure that has been building for far too long. If Genoa City can no longer give Sally the future she deserves, then maybe the boldest thing she can do is walk away before disappointment becomes permanent. And if Katie is truly desperate enough to save Logan, then bringing in Sally may be the kind of unexpected decision that changes both of their futures at once. Sometimes the biggest move is not the one anyone planned for. Sometimes it is the one born from frustration, pride, and the refusal to keep shrinking in a place that no longer knows what to do with you.